In the next unfolding chapter of The Young and the Restless, spoilers, Friday's full episodes October 24, 2025. Tension will deepen across Genoa City and far beyond, stretching the bonds between mothers and children, lovers and secrets. It begins quietly, almost deceptively, with a phone call that carries more weight than any storm. Mariah Copeland's voice trembles through the static, every syllable dripping with frustration and buried fear. For months she has been teetering on the edge, caught between resentment and redemption, trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy after years of emotional damage inflicted by Ian Ward, the man who once controlled her, haunted her, and shattered every fragile piece of trust she had in humanity. Now, Mariah has made a decision. She will confront him, not with weakness or hesitation, but with fury and clarity. For too long she's lived in the shadow of his manipulation. For too long she's allowed her past to define her future. This time, she will face Ian head-on, regardless of what it costs her peace, her therapy progress, or even her sanity. Sharon Newman doesn't yet know the details of what her daughter is planning. All she knows is that when the phone rings, the sound alone sends her back to the years when she feared losing Mariah altogether. The call is short, fractured, and full of emotion. Mariah's voice breaks as she insists she needs her mother but then cuts the line abruptly. That single moment is enough to send Sharon spiraling into confusion and guilt. For decades, Sharon has been the emotional nucleus of her family, but lately, the burden of holding everyone together has begun to break her from within. When she sits alone afterward, staring at the phone in her hand, the silence feels heavier than any argument. She whispers to herself that she can't go to Boston, that she can't face whatever Mariah is facing, because she's barely standing herself. Both my children are in pain, she thinks, and I can't save either of them. Those words echo through her mind like a curse, as if spoken not just to herself but to the ghosts of every bad decision she has ever made. The weight of that realization becomes unbearable, so she does the only thing she can think of. She calls Mariah's therapist. The conversation is tense but necessary. Sharon's voice is unsteady, but she's seeking guidance, not absolution. The therapist reassures her that Mariah is in a safe, supervised environment and that what she needs most is space and trust. That brings Sharon a small, fleeting sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, she breathes without shaking. But deep down, she knows this isn't over. A confrontation between Mariah and Ian Ward will not end quietly, not after all the psychological scars he left behind. And if Mariah truly intends to face him, it could awaken every buried trauma she has worked so hard to silence. Meanwhile, Nick Newman has his own storm to navigate. After the chaos of Noah's recent accident and the unsettling details surrounding it, Nick has been restless, consumed by questions that refuse to fade. He decides to return home, to see his mother, Nikki Newman, and share his growing suspicion about Sienna Bacall, a woman whose sudden reappearance seems too coincidental, too carefully timed. When Nick calls Nikki, his tone carries both exhaustion and unease. He recounts everything: the crash, Noah's memory gaps, the strange coincidences linking Sienna to the accident. Nikki listens in silence, her maternal instincts instantly on alert. She's seen enough deception in her lifetime to recognize when a story doesn't add up. She urges Nick to bring the matter to Victor, knowing her husband's investigative instincts are unmatched. Nick hesitates, knowing how dangerous it is to involve Victor in something that might spiral into a family conflict, but he eventually agrees. He asks Victor to quietly investigate Sienna Bacall's background, determined to uncover the truth before Noah gets hurt again. Somewhere in Los Angeles, as Nick's plane lands, Sharon sits in Noah's hospital room, watching her son sleep. The beeping of the heart monitor feels almost hypnotic, a fragile rhythm of life holding everything together. She thinks about the years she spent trying to protect him from the world, from his own recklessness, and from her mistakes. The past few months have been a blur of therapy sessions, guilt, and fear. Now, with Mariah's crisis on one side and Noah's silence on the other, she feels trapped between two fires, unable to extinguish either. When Nick arrives and steps quietly into the room, the air shifts. For a moment, they just look at each other, no words, only shared exhaustion. Nick finally breaks the silence, asking the question that's been haunting him since the flight: will Sharon stay here, or go to Boston to be with Mariah? Sharon's answer is quiet but resolute. She tells him she will stay in Los Angeles. There's no hesitation in her tone now. She explains that after speaking with Mariah's therapist, she believes her daughter is in capable hands. She's safe there, Sharon says, as if convincing herself as much as him. She's protected. Yet even as she says it, her fingers tighten around the edge of Noah's blanket, betraying her hidden fear that safety, in this world, is always temporary. Nick nods, understanding her choice, though the unease in his chest doesn't fade. He knows his sister's emotional stability is fragile, and if Mariah truly goes after Ian Ward, the repercussions could spread to everyone in their family. For Nick, the path ahead seems full of shadows: Sienna's motives, Noah's trauma, Mariah's obsession with justice, and Sharon's emotional unraveling, all threads of a larger pattern he can't yet see. He's always been the protector, the one who steps in when chaos strikes, but this time, even he senses something darker brewing. Far away, in Boston, Mariah sits outside the clinic in the biting wind, staring at a phone she can't bring herself to use again. She replays her mother's voice in her mind, the hesitation, the concern, the love buried under guilt. She knows Sharon is trying, but part of her can't forgive the past, can't forget the nights when she felt completely alone. Her anger at Ian isn't just about what he did to her, it's about reclaiming control, proving she's no longer a victim. When she finally walks toward the facility's main door, her reflection flashes in the glass, not the frightened girl Ian once manipulated, but a woman ready to fight her own demons. Back in Genoa City, Victor Newman receives Nick's call. As soon as he hears the name Sienna Bacall, his instincts sharpen. He knows the name from years ago, buried in files connected to corporate espionage and personal scandal. The mere mention of her sends a ripple of curiosity through him. He promises Nick he'll look into it discreetly, but Victor's version of discreet has always been anything but. Within hours, private investigators begin tracing Sienna's past, her movements, her financial ties, and what they find will only complicate the lives of every Newman involved. Sharon, unaware of the investigation, focuses on Noah. When he wakes, confused and groggy, she forces a smile, even though her mind is elsewhere. She hides her anxiety behind gentle words, telling herself that staying in Los Angeles was the right decision. Still, every time the phone vibrates, her stomach tightens, afraid it's another call from Boston. Days pass, and though Mariah's therapist assures her daughter is progressing, Sharon senses a storm approaching. A woman's intuition, sharpened by years of survival, tells her the danger isn't behind them, it's just shifting shape. Ian Ward's name begins to circulate again in quiet whispers. The possibility that he could re-emerge, drawn by Mariah's public defiance, haunts Sharon's every waking thought. If Ian finds her daughter again, there's no telling what kind of chaos will follow. For Nick, the investigation into Sienna takes an unsettling turn. Victor's team uncovers traces of her connection not only to Noah's art foundation but also to a series of offshore accounts tied to the same front companies that once funded Ian Ward's self-improvement retreats. The pattern is too precise to ignore. Nick realizes the two storylines, Mariah's confrontation with Ian and Noah's mysterious accident, might not be separate at all. He doesn't tell Sharon yet, not until he's sure. The weight of that secret eats at him, though, because if Sienna is connected to Ian in any way, Mariah's safety could already be compromised. The threads begin to converge: Sharon's maternal fear, Nick's growing paranoia, and Mariah's reckless courage, all leading to a storm that could redefine their family forever. By the time Sharon steps out of Noah's room one evening and looks at her reflection in the hospital window, she sees the truth she's been avoiding: love, in Genoa City, is never pure. It's always tangled with guilt, loyalty, and old sins refusing to die. She closes her eyes and whispers a prayer for her children, unaware that somewhere in Boston, Ian Ward has already received a message warning him that Mariah Copeland is coming for him. The night seemed endless in Los Angeles, where silence filled the hospital corridors and Sharon sat by Noah's bedside, her thoughts consumed by everything that had gone wrong. The soft hum of machines created a rhythm against which her mind tried to find order. When Nick entered, his expression carried both exhaustion and quiet determination. He asked the question that had been hovering in the air since she arrived. Whether she would stay in Los Angeles or go to Boston to see Mariah. Sharon took a slow breath, her gaze still on Noah. She said she would stay. Her voice was calm but threaded with fragility. After speaking with Mariah's therapist, she finally believed her daughter was in good hands. She's safe there, Sharon said quietly. She's protected. The words lingered in the air, a promise she desperately wanted to believe, even as something inside her whispered that safety was always temporary in their world. Nick nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly, but he could see the cracks behind her composure. Sharon's strength had always been the glue of their family, yet lately it felt more like glass, transparent, beautiful, and dangerously close to shattering. He stayed a little longer, talking about Victor's investigation into Sienna Bacall, about how nothing in Genoa City ever truly stayed buried. But Sharon barely heard him. Her mind was in two places, one with her son lying unconscious before her, and another with her daughter, far away in Boston, facing demons Sharon herself could never fully understand. Meanwhile, in Boston, Mariah sat in a dimly lit room at the clinic, her eyes fixed on the wall but her mind lost in a haze of old memories. She had come here to heal, to finally confront the shadows that Ian Ward had carved into her psyche. Yet healing wasn't simple, and the ghosts didn't wait for permission to return. They came in waves, as real as breath, as cruel as time. The air grew colder, and in that moment between waking and dreaming, Ian appeared, or maybe her mind conjured him, because part of her still needed him to be real in order to destroy him. He looked the same as before, calm, confident, eyes filled with the same quiet menace that had once made her believe she owed him her life. "You're suffering from a loneliness you've created," he said softly, almost kindly. Mariah swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I feel lonely because I am lonely," she answered, her tone half defiant, half resigned. "You're not really here. You're dead. Victor Newman shot you. You belong in hell, that's where you are." Ian smiled, that same slow, haunting smile that had followed her through nightmares for years. "The world," he murmured, "is full of miracles. Death is not always the end, my dear. Would you like to feel your own heartbeat? Give me your hand." Mariah hesitated, feeling her pulse quicken as he reached toward her. The air around her thickened, and for a second she thought she could feel the warmth of his hand against hers. It wasn't real, it couldn't be, but the sensation was enough to make her tremble. Ian's voice dropped to a whisper, the way he used to speak when he wanted to hypnotize her. "That's why I'm the only person you can ever trust," he said, clapping his hands softly, almost mockingly, as if congratulating her for something she didn't understand. "Because when everyone else leaves, I stay. Always." Mariah squeezed her eyes shut, refusing to look at him, but even in the darkness, she could hear his voice, feel the presence pressing against her consciousness. When she opened her eyes again, he had moved closer, smiling with childlike delight. "Peekaboo," he said in a sing-song tone, holding his hand to his eyes like a magician revealing a trick. On the floor between them lay a playing card, the Queen of Hearts, untouched, its edges smooth. Ian bent to pick it up, turning it over between his fingers. "You remember this?" he asked. "Tessa tore it apart, didn't she?" Mariah nodded slowly, her voice breaking as she whispered, "She did. She destroyed it." Ian tilted his head, studying her with a kind of cruel fascination. "Then why is it still here?" The room seemed to tilt around her. Mariah's mind raced, was it a hallucination, or something darker? "Are you the reason I came here?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. Ian didn't hesitate. "You came here because you have a darkness inside you," he said, his tone soft but sharp as a blade. "You try to pretend you're pure, that you're kind, but you're not. You're cruel, Mariah. You're like me." His words slithered into her mind, mixing truth and venom until she could barely tell the difference. She felt a shiver crawl down her spine as she asked him, "Then what should I do with this darkness?" Ian smiled again, his voice like silk. "Embrace it. Act on it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she couldn't look away. "Have you done it yet?" he asked, his voice rising with a twisted excitement. "Have you done what you came here to do? Tell me everything, Mariah. Tell me what you've done." She shook her head violently, pressing her palms against her temples as if she could silence him that way. "Even after you died," she said through sobs, "I couldn't escape you. You're still there, smiling at me in the dark." Ian chuckled softly, stepping closer. "Because I'm part of you. You can't kill a reflection." Mariah's breath caught as she looked at him, or rather, the version of him that lived inside her mind. "You're not a person," she whispered. "You're just an image, a shadow I created to keep my pain alive." For a moment, Ian said nothing. Then he leaned forward, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Then why are you still talking to me?" Mariah closed her eyes again, trying to steady her breathing. She remembered every therapy session, every word her doctor had told her, that healing required facing what terrified her most, not hiding from it. So she opened her eyes, looked straight at him, and said, "You're right about one thing. You'll always be here. But not because you're real, because you're what I'm finally ready to destroy." Ian's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "Destroy me," he repeated, his tone laced with amusement. "You can't destroy what you are." His form seemed to flicker, like a mirage about to vanish. "You came here to find peace, Mariah, but peace doesn't exist without pain. You need me, and I'll be here long after you stop pretending you can erase me." Back in Los Angeles, Sharon stared out the hospital window, the city lights flickering like distant memories. She didn't know what was happening in Boston at that exact moment, but a chill ran through her as if her heart somehow sensed her daughter's struggle. Nick returned with 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her. "You did the right thing," he said gently, though his eyes betrayed his own doubts. Sharon smiled faintly but didn't reply. She thought about Mariah's voice, about how much pain hid beneath her anger. The mother in her wanted to believe her daughter was safe, but the woman who had lived through decades of loss and manipulation knew better. Safety was an illusion, especially when the ghosts of Genoa City refused to stay buried. In Boston, Mariah's body trembled as she tried to regain control. Ian was gone now, or at least out of sight, but his presence lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. The Queen of Hearts card lay on the floor where he had dropped it. She bent down, picked it up, and stared at it until the tears blurred her vision. She thought of Tessa, of the love that had once healed her, and realized that if she didn't end this cycle now, she would never be free. The darkness Ian spoke of wasn't a curse, it was the residue of what he had done to her. And perhaps, in confronting it, she could finally reclaim her life. Unbeknownst to Mariah, Victor's investigation into Sienna Bacall was uncovering something extraordinary: hidden financial transfers, old phone records, and one very disturbing discovery. Years ago, Sienna had attended one of Ian Ward's self-awareness retreats. The timing was uncanny. While Sharon tried to hold her family together and Nick sought the truth, the threads of the past and present were weaving into one terrifying pattern. Somewhere between illusion and reality, Ian Ward was reaching out again, not as a man, but as an idea, a toxin that refused to die. And as the night deepened in both cities, a sense of foreboding settled over them all. Sharon would wake from a restless sleep with a single thought echoing in her mind, that Mariah's battle wasn't over, that perhaps none of them were ever truly safe as long as Ian Ward's name could still be spoken. And in Boston, as Mariah stood before a mirror, holding the Queen of Hearts between trembling fingers, she whispered the same truth her mother had always known, that healing is not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it, even when the past refuses to let go.